Good morning, children. Today we are going to start a new civics chapter, electoral politics. It's a very informative chapter, very interesting because it tells you the need for elections, why elections should take place, which type of election do we call an democratic election, in a democracy, what is the procedure during election, etc., etc. So this chapter is going to give you a lot of information. Let us begin. We will start from page 58. Why do we need elections? Elections take place regularly in any democracy. All of us know that if you take the example of India, elections take place after every 5 years. General elections are held after every 5 years normally. But if the vote of no confidence is passed against the government, then the elections can be held in between also, that is before the tenure of 5 years. But normally we see that elections are held every 5 years. Elections take place regularly in any democracy. We noted in chapter 1 that there are more than 100 countries in the world in which elections take place to choose people's representatives. We also read that elections are held in many countries that are not democratic. But why do we need elections? Let us try to imagine a democracy without elections. A rule of people is possible without an elections if all the people can sit together every day and take all the decisions. So it is only possible to run the country without elections if all citizens of the country sit together every day and discuss matters and decide and come to a conclusion every day. But as we have already seen in chapter 2, this is not possible in a large community, especially in a large country like India. Nor is it possible for everyone to have the time and knowledge to take decisions on all matters. Very true. All people are not so knowledgeable or so experienced that they can participate in decision making. Therefore, in most democracies, people rule through their representatives. You can take the best example of your country. We, the people of the country, the citizens of the country, choose our representatives. Is there a democratic way of selecting representatives without elections? Let us think of a place where representatives are selected on the basis of age and experience, or a place where they are chosen on the basis of education or knowledge. There could be some difficulty in deciding on who is more experienced or knowledgeable. But let us say the people can resolve these difficulties. Clearly, such a place does not require elections. But can we call this place a democracy? How do we find out if the people like their representatives or not? How do we ensure that these representatives rule as per the wishes of the people? How do we make sure that those who the people don't like do not remain their representatives? This requires a mechanism by which people can choose their representatives at regular intervals and change them if they wish to do so. This mechanism is called election. Very, very important. So if you are asked to define what is election, then what will you write? Election is a mechanism by which you will start underlining from here. Where it is written, this requires a mechanism. You will not write this requires, you will write election is a mechanism by which people can choose their representatives at regular intervals and change them if they wish to do so. As I just told you, if you take your country's example, then elections are held every 5 years. The citizens choose their representatives, they vote and they elect their representatives, and if if the representatives are found not fulfilling the wishes of the people, not running the country properly, then a vote of no confidence can be passed in the parliament, and then fresh elections can take place in between also. That means before 5 years also. This mechanism is called election. Therefore, elections are considered essential in our times for any representative democracy. In an election, the voters make many choices. Now, you must learn the 3 points given. They can choose who will make laws for them. So, if you are asked what choices do the voters make, then these 3 points you will have to write. They can choose who will make laws for them. They can choose who will form the government and take major decisions. They can choose the party whose policies will guide the government and law making. So these 3 important functions are there which the voters can perform. The voters have the freedom to choose who will make the government, who will make laws, and which party is going to make policies that will guide the government and law making. So these 3 points you have to learn, you should write important here. What makes an election democratic? What kind of elections should be held in the country that we can call that election a democratic election? Elections can be held in many ways. All democratic countries hold elections, but most non-democratic countries also hold some kind of elections. How do we distinguish democratic elections from any other election? We have discussed this question briefly in chapter 2. We discussed many examples of countries where elections are held, but they can't really be called democratic elections. If you remember the example of Pakistan, it was given in your previous chapter. Let us recall what we learned there and start with a simple list of the minimum conditions of a democratic election. First, everyone should be able to choose. This means that everyone should have one vote and every vote should have equal value. Now children, the points which we are going to read, this is the first point and there are total 5 points. You have to learn all these 5 points by heart because they tell you what are the minimum conditions that any election should fulfill so that we can call that election democratic. The first thing is that everyone should be allowed to choose their representatives. There should be one vote and each vote should have equal value. That means every citizen is allowed to cast one vote and each vote has its equal importance. Nobody can say that my vote is of no value, so I will not go to cast my vote. Every vote has equal value. Every vote is very important. So this is the first thing, that every citizen of a democratic country who is 18 years of age or above has the right to choose his representatives. He has the right to cast his vote because each vote has its own value. Second, there should be something to choose from. Pay attention, all points are very important. There should be something to choose from. Parties and candidates should be free to contest elections and should offer some real choice to the voters. That means there should be more than one party. There should be multi-party system in such kind of democracies where the voters will have lots of choices and they can decide which party they should vote for. Third, the choice should be offered at regular intervals. That means after a gap of 5 years, after an interval of 5 years, the election should be held so that the citizens of the country can be offered choices after regular intervals. Elections must be held regularly after every few years. In India, they are held after 5 years. Fourth, The candidate preferred by the people should get elected. This is obvious that the candidate, the party whom the people like, who has got majority votes, that party forms the government. The candidate preferred by the people should get elected. Fifth, elections should be conducted in a free and fair manner where people can choose as they really wish. So the people, when they go to cast their vote, they should not be pressurized to cast their vote for a particular political party. They should not be pressurized to vote for a particular candidate. They are free to cast their vote for whichever party they want to, for whichever candidate they want to, and there should be free and fair elections. So these 5 points are very, very necessary for any election to be called a democratic election. Please learn these 5 points. These might look very simple and easy conditions, but there are many countries where these are not fulfilled. In this chapter, we will apply these conditions to the elections held in our own country to see if we can call these democratic elections. Is it good to have political competition? Elections are thus all about political competitions. Why are we calling it political competition? Because each political party is trying to compete with the other political party so that they can get maximum votes from the citizens and they can form the government. They try their best to fulfill the demands of the people before the elections are held. You must have seen that when elections approach, the roads are being constructed, all important projects which are for the welfare of the people, if they are pending for a long time, they are completed. Why? Because they want to, each political party wants that they should be highlighted in the eyes of the people. The people should see that they are working for their benefit, they are working for the people, and then when elections will be held, the people will cast their votes for that political party. This competition takes various forms. The most obvious form is the competition among political parties. At the constituency level, it takes the form of competition among several candidates. If there is one constituency and different candidates from different political parties are contesting in elections from that constituency, then they have competition among themselves. If there is no competition, elections will become pointless, because competition in every field is very necessary. The only thing that should be kept in mind is the competition should be healthy competition. One should not start cheating, taking bribe, or use muscle power or use weapons to win elections. Competition, if it is healthy, is very much necessary, whether it is in elections or elsewhere. But is it good to have political competition? Clearly, an electoral competition has many demerits. It creates a sense of disunity and factionalism. Now children, there is one word, faction. From that word, factionalism has become another word. So please don't get confused. Faction means a group of people who express a shared opinion. A group of people who express a common opinion, a shared opinion. It is not fraction. Please don't consider it a spelling mistake. It is not a spelling mistake. It is not fraction. It is faction. Faction means a group of people who express a shared opinion different from people who are not in that group. That means the people who form a faction, they have a common opinion. Their opinion can be different from some other faction, from some other group of people. So, one demerit of competition in politics is that it creates a sense of disunity and it creates factions. That means it divides people into groups. You would have heard of people complaining of party politics in your locality. Different political parties and leaders often level allegations against one another. That means they put blames on one another. Parties and candidates often use dirty tricks to win elections. As I just told you, that competition, if it is healthy, then it is good. Otherwise, giving bribes to win elections, or using muscle power to win election, all this is dirty politics. All this should not be practiced at all. Some people say that this pressure to win electoral fights does not allow sensible long-term policies to be formulated. Some good people who may wish to serve the country do not enter this arena. That means many people who want to serve the country, they start finding out other ways and means how they can serve the country, and they don't want to enter politics because sometimes politics becomes dirty politics. They do not like the idea of being dragged into unhealthy competition. Our constitution makers were aware of these problems, that such kind of problems will arise during elections. Yet, they opted for free competition in elections as the way to select our future leaders. They did so because this system works better in the long run. Which system works better? The system of having free competition during elections. It is a long term process, and it is beneficial also because the people are free to choose their representatives in such elections. They did so because this system works better in the long run. In an ideal world, all political leaders know what is good for the people and are motivated only by a desire to serve them. Political competition is not necessary in such an ideal world. But that is not what happens in real life. Actually, every political party knows how they should serve the people, what is good for the people, how they should function, etc. But in their real life, they don't do what they are expected to do. Political leaders all over the world, like all other professionals, are motivated by a desire to advance their political career. That means, although they know what is their duty, how they can keep the people happy, how they can fulfill the wishes of the citizens, they know everything. But very few political parties or political leaders fulfill these wishes of the citizens. They don't do it in reality because their main motive is to pursue their political career. They are more concentrated towards enhancing their political career. That means if they are the minister in the state, they will want to become the minister in the next elections. They would want to win. They would want to get the ministry of the central government. So they are always having this concept in mind that they should pursue their political career. That is why they don't focus on fulfilling the wishes of the people. They want to remain in power or get power and positions for themselves. They may wish to serve the people as well, but it is risky to depend entirely on their sense of duty. Besides, even when they wish to serve the people, they may not know what is required to do so, or their ideas may not match what the people really want. So it means that it is not that political leaders don't want to fulfill the wishes of the people. They don't want to serve the citizens. No, they want. But in many cases, it has been seen that they do not know the method, how they can keep the people happy, how they can fulfill the wishes of the people, and what the people really want from them. How do we deal with this real life situation? So now we will see how the party leaders can deal with this critical situation. One way is to try and improve the knowledge and character of political leaders. The other and more realistic way is to set up a system where political leaders are rewarded for serving the people and punished for not doing so. Who decides this reward or punishment? Giving reward to political leaders if they fulfill the wishes of the people, if they serve the people well, and punishing if they don't. Who punishes them? Who rewards them? Let us see. The simple answer is the people. We reward them. We give them reward. We give them punishment. How? By voting for them or by not voting for them. If there is a party ABC and they are running the country, they are running the government, and they are not functioning as they were expected to function, then a vote of no confidence can be passed against this ABC political party, and the government will have to resign, the ministers will have to resign. Again, fresh elections will take place. It can be after 5 years or before 5 years also. So if the people see that the political party which was ruling the country now was not ruling well, in the next elections majority people, citizens, will not vote for them. So this is their punishment. But if they see that they are really working very well in their past 5 years, they have done lot of work, the country had progressed a lot in various fields, and lots of achievements were seen during their tenure, then again when elections will take place, the people will vote for them. This will be their reward. This is what electoral competition does. Regular electoral competition provides incentives to political parties and leaders. They know that if they raise issues that people want to be raised, their popularity and chances of victory will increase in the next elections. But if they fail to satisfy the voters with their work, they will not be able to win again. This is what I told you just now. So if a political party is motivated only by desire to be in power, even then it will be forced to serve the people. This is a bit like the way market works. Even if a shopkeeper is interested only in his profit, he is forced to give good service to the customers. If he does not, the customers will go to some other shop. So this is just like marketing. Similarly, political competition may cause divisions and some ugliness, but it finally helps to force political parties and leaders to serve the people. So whether they want or they don't want, but if they want to be in power, they have to serve the people, whether willingly or unwillingly. What is our system of elections? Can we say that Indian elections are democratic? To answer this question, let us take a look at how elections are held in India. Lok Sabha and Vidhan Sabha, that is assembly elections, are held regularly after every 5 years. Please underline. Such questions can be asked in 1 mark question, that after how many years are the Lok Sabha elections held. So you have to write after every 5 years. After 5 years, the term of all the elected representatives comes to an end. The Lok Sabha or Vidhan Sabha stands dissolved. Elections are held in all constituencies at the same time, either on the same day or within a few days. This is called a general election. That means all over the country, in a gap of few days only, the elections are held in the country at the same time. This is called general elections. Sometimes election is held only for one constituency to fill the vacancy caused by death or resignation of a member. This is called a by-election. Please underline. All these definitions are very, very important. First of all, underline general election. Elections are held in all constituencies at the same time, either on the same day or within a few days. This is called general election. Then sometimes election is held only for one constituency to fill the vacancy caused by death or resignation of a member. This is called by-election. In this chapter, we will focus on general elections. Electoral constituencies. You read about the people of Haryana electing 90 MLAs. You may have wondered how they did that. Did every person in Haryana vote for all the 90 MLAs? You perhaps know that this is not the case. In our country, we follow an area based system of representation. The country is divided into different areas for purpose of election. These areas are called electoral constituencies. Underline what is a constituency or what is an electoral constituency. Answer is the same. In our country, we follow area-based system of representation. The country is divided into different areas for the purpose of election. These areas are called constituencies. The voters who live in an area elect one representative. See how elections are held, how representatives are selected in constituencies. The voters who live in an area, in a particular constituency or in a particular area, they elect one representative. For Lok Sabha elections, the country is divided into 543 constituencies. Underline. The representative elected from each constituency is called a member of parliament or an MP. Underline. The representative elected from each constituency is called the member of parliament or an MP. One of the features of a democratic election is that every vote should have equal value. That is why our constitution requires that each constituency should have a roughly equal population living within it, so that more or less they get the same number of votes. It is not that because of very less population one constituency loses in the election because they have got very few votes, and where the constituency is a very big one, there is lot of population, large population, they get more votes and they win the election. This kind of discrepancy should not be there. Similarly, each state is divided into a specific number of assembly constituencies. In this case, the elected representative is called the member of legislative assembly or an MLA. Underline. Each state is divided into a specific number of assembly constituencies. The elected representative is called of what? Of this assembly constituency. The elected members are called members of the legislative assembly or an MLA. Each parliamentary constituency has within it several assembly constituencies. The same principle applies for panchayat and municipal elections. Each village or town is divided into several wards that are like constituencies. Each ward elects one member of the village or the urban local body. Sometimes these constituencies are counted as seats, for each constituency represents one seat in the assembly. When we say that Lok Dal won 60 seats in Haryana, it means that candidates of Lok Dal won in 60 assembly constituencies in the state, and thus Lok Dal had 60 MLAs in the state assembly. So what is important here to remember, that each constituency is sometimes referred to as seat. They have won 60 seats. That means they have won from 60 constituencies. You don't have to learn anything in this paragraph, children. Whatever you have to learn, I am already telling you to mark and underline. Reserved constituencies. Our constitution entitles every citizen to elect her or his representative and to be elected as a representative. Pay attention. Pay attention. It's very important. I am reading again. Our constitution entitles every citizen, that means gives permission to every citizen to elect her or his representative or to be elected as a representative. That means if I want, I can also become a representative from a constituency, or I can elect a person from any constituency to become a representative. The constitution makers, however, were worried that in an open electoral competition, certain weaker sections may not stand a good chance to get elected to the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assemblies. They may not have the required resources, education, and contacts to contest and win elections against others. Those who are influential and resourceful may prevent them from winning elections. If that happens, our parliament and assemblies would be deprived of the voice of a significant section of our population. That would make our democracy less representative and less democratic. Have you understood what the paragraph told you? The paragraph is saying that the constitution makers were worried that the weaker sections of people, the minorities, the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, the weaker sections of people may not get a chance to stand in the elections in the Lok Sabha or in the state legislative assemblies. They may not be so educated, they may not have so much money to stand in elections, or they may not have so much resource. So what will happen? Only the privileged sections of people or the majority sections of people, they will be seen in the parliament or in the assemblies, and a good amount of population, the weaker sections form a good percentage of our country's population. Those section of people will be deprived of getting an opportunity to raise their voice in the parliament or elsewhere. And if this happens, if these weaker sections of people will be neglected, they will not be given an opportunity to be a part of the parliament or be a part of the state legislative assemblies, they are not given a chance to stand in elections, then such kind of a policy, such kind of a democracy cannot be called a democracy in its true sense, and we cannot call it a representative democracy, because representative democracy means that every section of people, every section of people in the society should get a chance to be a part of the government, whether it is in the state or it is in the central. They should represent themselves. If they are not getting this chance, they are deprived from this opportunity, then it cannot be called a representative democracy. Okay, now I am stopping here for today. In our next civics class, we will start from the next paragraph. Whatever I have made you learn, made you underline or mark, please learn them. And whatever we have done today in the civics class, read everything once again so that the concepts are clear to you. Okay, in our next class, we will start from the next paragraph, page number 62. Thank you.